I have done autism awareness videos for the last 3 years, and in that time, I've gotten hundreds of messages from people on the subject. These messages usually come from other people like me, people who have struggled with autism, and their messages tend to follow similar patterns. These messages will feature outpourings of gratitude, requests for advice, recommendations for specific services, all of which I have addressed in video form. However, there is one type of message that I regularly get that I have not addressed publicly until now. Often, people will ask me about the way autism is represented in media. Is it accurate? Should it be better? Do you think representation is important? I have to be honest, when people present me the question of representation, I've gotten a bit frustrated. Don't get me wrong, I don't get angry at the people asking the question. I get frustrated with myself, because for a long time, I just didn't understand why people gave such importance to representation. It always seemed like a tangential, micro issue. I always believed that what was more important was attaining employment, healthcare, and emotional support, things that people with autism, including myself, so desperately need. But then I remembered, as I often do, that people without autism don't always respond to fact-based, non-emotional appeals. Maybe they need forms of art that can get the message across. It's tricky though, because oftentimes mediums of art will be used as platforms to preach political and philosophical positions, rendering any emotional appeal null and void. Also, one would need to depict autism in a respectful way, but not so respectful that we are made out to be deities devoid of criticism. For much of my life, I had never found a blatant representation of autism that was accurate, respectful, and non-sententious. But then I saw Mary and Max. Ironically, it's like the movie was made for me. Not only does this film give the best representation of autism that I have ever seen, it's also one of the best movies I've ever seen. Everything, whether it's the script, the animation, the performances, the music, it is all so delightfully weird. Watching this movie triggers the same feelings of awe and wonder that we all had as children, where everything was new and enticingly odd, off-putting yet entrancing, heartbreaking yet exhilarating. Every time a sentence or a scene begins in this movie, you think it will conclude in a certain way, but then it doesn't, and it's so refreshing. Every second of this movie is a celebration of the abnormal, and why we should seek the abnormal in order to live the most meaningful life possible. Max is a 44-year-old autistic man who lives in New York City. The titular Mary is an 8-year-old girl who lives in Australia. Though they live half a world apart, these two develop a deep, supportive friendship by sending each other countless letters over many years. Though Max has autism and Mary does not, they nonetheless share a lot in common. They both love the same cartoon, they both like unusual desserts, but most importantly, they are both terribly lonely, and they both struggle dealing with the world around them. Quickly, these letters evolve from typical pen-pal musings about each other's culture to therapeutic exchanges of emotional validation and advice, all communicated in the quirkiest, charming ways. That is the basic synopsis of the film. I will not give away major story spoilers in this review because I desperately want all of you to go watch it. What I will do, for the remainder of this video, is explain why the film's depiction of autism is so profoundly good. Max is a walking repository of autistic symptoms, and the film does a great job of presenting many of them as morally neutral, not necessarily as flaws or strengths, but as differences. Max has a strict need for routine and order. He wears the exact same clothes, he eats the exact same food, has the exact same hobbies, and he must always have a goldfish in his apartment. Anytime his daily routine is interrupted by a new and unusual event, he is prone to a neurological meltdown. His meltdowns can be triggered by things that most non-autistic people would find mundane. Things like crowds, bright lights, sudden noises, or strong smells. Depending on the severity of the meltdown, it can take him days to calm down. In order to get his brain to comply, he will do things like scream or hyperventilate in a corner, sometimes for an entire day. The film depicts these meltdowns very well. Though it exaggerates one or two things for comical effect, the basic reality of a neurological meltdown is accurate and tasteful. Best of all, in depicting the violence and regularity of these meltdowns, it makes Max respectable for being able to overcome them on a regular basis and push on with his life. He's also respectable for a number of other reasons. Like many people with autism, Max has above average intelligence. He is a very articulate person, as we witness with his letters to Mary. For example, when Mary sends a drawing of herself to Max, Max responds by saying, quote, "Your drawing is an interesting visual portrayal of yourself," instead of something like, "That's a pretty picture." He is knowledgeable about random subjects like the way a toaster works, or the nature of chaos theory. He can spend hours reading about these niche yet complicated subjects without feeling exhausted. He is so efficient at this that he can even read 2 books at once, one eyeball on each book. Granted, nobody can actually do this, not even autistic people, but it gets the message across. Though Max is intelligent, his autistic tendency to focus on niche subjects, combined with his emotional issues, makes it difficult for him to have a successful career. He has worked several low-level, low-skill jobs and continues to do so. If only he could find the right job position where he could exploit his strengths while also having his emotional needs respected, he could become the hardest working employee. He could set standards in his particular field of expertise, just as so many other autistic people have. Yet, the working world is not built around the needs of the autistic minority, and thus, Max meanders from one dead-end job to the other. But the best thing about this film's portrayal of autism isn't its honest, objective portrayal of various autistic symptoms. The absolute best thing is that the film doesn't use Max's autism to put him above criticism. Max is flawed in numerous ways, and the film isn't shy to point these flaws out. Max is morbidly obese, he has very little ambition, and he's overly judgmental. While it is arguable that these traits can be linked to some of his autistic traits, it's also arguable that these flaws are within his power to change. It is this dilemma, the question of what is or isn't in our control to change, that rests at the core of every autistic person's heart, and the film presents it in the most beautifully subtle way. By that, I mean it unconsciously conditions the audience to realize this dilemma on their own. While Max might have the capacity to change some of his circumstances, he might not have the capacity to change others. And the only way the average person can help somebody with autism distinguish between these circumstances is if they offer patience and understanding. Though one can be critical, they should always be encouraging. It is with this patience, understanding, and encouragement that an 8-year-old girl is able to bring out the best in a 44-year-old man, where almost nobody else in Max's life was able to do so. I won't say what Max is able to improve or to what extent. I will only say that he was successful in at least one respect. Finally, I want to give serious kudos to the film for choosing to tackle one of the most controversial questions surrounding autism, that being the notion of a cure for autism. If one were able to develop a cure for autism, should we develop it and administer it? Though it will please my viewers to hear that I believe the answer is no, it might not please all of you to hear that it's a belief that I struggle to hold. Very often, having autism can be the most physically and emotionally painful thing. It caused me trauma that I don't think I will ever overcome. The same is the case for Max, and is primarily the reason for his own self-imposed isolation. Nonetheless, I recognize that if I were to try and cure myself of autism, it would not only cure me of the benefits that come along with having autism, but it would also remove my sense of self. Imagine you were a robot with a human brain, and then 90% of your brain was replaced with somebody else's brain. Would you still be yourself? I won't say how this issue comes up in the film, but I will say that Max's dealings with the concept of a cure is powerfully affecting. Though being different can bring a unique set of agonizing challenges, it can also bring the most blissful rewards. By experiencing that level of pain in my own life, I was conditioned to never inflict a similar level of pain on others. No matter the circumstances, I always try to be calm and constructive. And I think you'll find that most autistic people are the same way, even though they may sometimes struggle with their words. It is from experiencing the pain of autism that we can offer the deepest, most honest forms of love. That is a superpower, one that every autistic person possesses. When you encounter another person who doesn't fit in, the level of validation, of love that we can bring to their lives could be greater than any material thing. It will be the thing that strengthens you, that will help you rise above even the worst imaginable pain. By giving a basic amount of patience and love to somebody who is different, you could be a legitimate angel on earth to that person. That was what Mary was to Max, and Max to Mary. And you owe it to yourself to experience the profound depth of their friendship. If you believe in my mission to promote mental health and spread mental health awareness, you could do a couple of things. One thing that you can do that's free and simple is hitting the like button. Doing so will tell the YouTube algorithm to share not only this video, but all my other mental health related videos in people's recommended feeds. Let's introduce this masterpiece of a film into other people's lives. Also, please consider supporting me on Patreon. That will help me produce meaningful and helpful content for many years to come. Thanks so much for watching, and just remember, as always, to stay yellow.